Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Go to Bolt Fam, it's the director. Chargers fans, how you doing? All right, we got a lot to go over today, man. A pretty big concept for a video. We're going to go over all of the confirmed Chargers rookie targets for the 2024 season. Kind of inspired by this tweet, actually. Chargers Country put out that Edan Cooper is going to be visiting the Chargers on April 4th. And I responded, I said, I haven't talked enough about this guy, but he's a legit Chargers target in day 2. It got me thinking, there's a lot of guys that I haven't covered that are in talks with the Chargers in one way, shape, or form. They're connected with the Bolts, and I figured it was my responsibility, nay, my duty and obligation to get these guys in front of the eyes of the Bolt fam. Some of these guys I'm not actually very familiar with at all. Did a little bit of research on all of them, hopefully to give you guys a little bit of context as to who they are, and maybe on draft day, why the Chargers decided to go this way in the first place. I hope, if anything, this video serves as, even if one guy from this list is drafted, maybe somebody that we didn't know too much about before today, then I've done my job. All right, so before we do kick off this video, man, shout out to the sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $100. Get in on the action, have some fun, and support the channel in that way. Newcomers definitely take advantage of this special on screen. Before we do kick off, hit us up with a like and sub. If you do enjoy this content, the small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, bell notification helps me out a lot. Help us get us closer to 50K. Let's do it, baby. Lights, camera, action. Your confirmed Chargers rookie targets for the 2024 season. Again, we got a lot of guys to go through. Before we do jump into this list, though, huge shout out to Bolt's Draft Talk on Twitter. This video would not have been possible without his help. This is one of the best accounts to go looking for if you want to really understand what the Chargers are looking at in the draft, and also a good understanding of some of the prospects on there. Haven't had a lot of time to check everything out myself. He puts out a ton of awesome content and deep dives and looks at some of these rookies, but definitely worth the follow out there. Also, shout out to WalterFootball.com helping us find out some of the top 30 visits here. So let's go ahead and start here. We have a lot of names. We're not going to cover every guy in detail, in depth, but we're going to start here with Troy Fautanu, okay? Offensive lineman out of Washington. This guy could be a guard. This guy could be a tackle. But a big reason I wanted to start with him is because I think he's been confirmed as a Chargers top 30 player, which means that in the league, I think you get 30 players per club to work out privately, if I do understand that correctly. And the Chargers do have a lot of these guys out there publicly already as the players that they have selected. Not all of them have confirmed in terms of visiting already, but a lot of them have been contacted, and a lot of them actually have already visited with the Chargers. So Fautanu would be an awesome pick for the Chargers, one of the top tackles and guards, or should say offensive linemen in this draft. I think, honestly, the Chargers wouldn't have a problem starting him outside. We really didn't have that problem with Rashawn Slater. Look how that worked out. But I would imagine this is in a scenario where the Chargers maybe trade down a little bit, considering some of the talent at number 5. Next up, Braden Fisk. This dude is one that the more I looked into, the more I kind of got excited about. I remember being impressed by his pass rushing ability from the interior. This dude's been climbing, man. I remember him in like the 5th or 4th round not too long ago now, and I think the 2nd round-ish. This dude would be a monster in the middle of the line. Think about him as like Morgan Fox 2.0, but with a little bit more juice in terms of getting to the quarterback. So that would be an awesome one. And again, I have all these guys marked. Not all of them are completely confirmed. Okay, I guess it does say that in the title, but let me be clear in saying that they have a top 30 visit next to their name, but it's not confirmed if they have visited yet, as well as some of these stem from rumors, talks behind the scenes at pro days and stuff. So take everything with a grain of salt, but I would say this is a pretty solid and reliable list of players that we're going through right now. So a top 30 visit for Braden Fisk. Let's go ahead and move on to the next guy, Nate Wiggins. And I put a question mark next to some of the guys where I'm like, I'm not quite sure I can confirm it, but there is rumors out there that the Chargers' interest in Nate Wiggins, cornerback out of Clemson. I think it was something to do with the pro day. I don't remember. I don't think he participated in that, did he not? Either way, his name was floating around out there. This would be an awesome trade down target for the Chargers if we were to say have a second first-round pick via the Minnesota Vikings. This would be probably instantly the Chargers cornerback one. He's like 6'2", ran a crazy fast 40, awesome in coverage. Just got to watch out a little bit for his health and availability. But other than that, this is one of the best corners in the entire draft. What about more of a sleeper guy? Well, this guy was confirmed to have met or talked with the Chargers. Charon Johnson, cornerback out of Fresno State. Haven't found much on this guy other than he's pretty solid all around, but the biggest emphasis you're going to get on this guy, he's fast. He's stupid fast. Ran a 4.28 at his pro day. I think the Chargers were one of a very few teams to have sent multiple personnel to that pro day, so it's somebody to look and keep an eye out for. Maybe has that kind of effect as what we saw a couple years ago where no one really saw Jasir Taylor and Dean Leonard, on our radars. This could be kind of the similar sort of prospect to look at. And again, maybe a lot of these guys go undrafted and become priority undrafted free agents for the Chargers. All right. Moving on. This one was, I guess, more of a rumor from the Combine. Kool-Aid McKinstry, cornerback, Alabama. This would be an awesome fit for the Chargers, especially, in terms of character, in terms of, upside. He's been sliding a little bit, so maybe a bit of preparation to see what he's got if he's available in the second round. I'm sure the Chargers will pull the trigger on that, but definitely one to keep an eye out for. The Chargers definitely need corner, and he's one of those higher prospect guys that could be available in day 2. All right. One that we know the Chargers were looking at very, very diligently was J.C. Latham, offensive tackle, Alabama. This is perhaps the best true right tackle in the draft, especially if you're looking for a guy that's going to be fitting Jim Harbaugh's and Greg Roman's vision for the offense. They spent a lot of time with him at the pro day. And again, this is a guy that I would expect to be a trade down target. Maybe this dude gets selected in the top 10. I don't know. But if the Chargers do trade down outside the top 10 or near the end of the top 10, I could see this being a pick for the Chargers pretty easily. All right. Next up, and this next guy, I think he's been confirmed as being contacted, right? He's been contacted for a top 30 visit. I don't know if he has yet, but Bo Nix was on that list, y'all. What that means, I don't know. Do the Chargers want to add another number 10 from Oregon to really strengthen up that quarterback room? Maybe, but I think the likeliness of this happening is very, very low. Maybe the Chargers just going through their due diligence, maybe something to do with Justin Herbert. I have no idea why he's on this list. He's an awesome quarterback, but I would assume he's going to get scooped up by another team, maybe even in the first round. You never know. I would be shocked if he didn't go in the first with how many quarterback needy teams there are. And honestly, the talent. I think Bo Nix is an awesome talent, but again, top 30 guy, take that for what you will. He's floating around out there. Next up, Marshawn Lloyd, running back, USC. This one was a confirmed visit and talks with the Chargers, and one that I think got a lot of us excited. I know a lot of Chargers fans / USC fans have a pretty good insight on this dude, but in my research and looking into him, he would be an awesome fit for the Chargers. He's got awesome, quickness. He's got a lot of power for his size. Really does kind of fit the mold of what the Chargers would be looking for in a complement back to Gus Edwards, which really kind of feels like the direction they want to go. Gus Edwards, big back, the bell cow, and then a guy that complements him behind him at RB2. And I think this draft, yes, not huge on the RB1 talent for me, but I think RB2 has a solid amount of dudes that I would be looking at, and Marshawn Lloyd is definitely among the top of the guys on that list for me. All right, next up, Adarius Mitchell. This, again, I don't know if this one's confirmed, a little question mark next to it, but I know the Chargers were at the pro day. And it's one that I think if you're a Chargers fan and we do trade down and we do not select a wide receiver in the early first part of the first round, you're probably going to be looking at Adarius Mitchell in the later half of the first round. Maybe he's slipping into the second. I think that's pretty unlikely. But this is a dude that can be a wide receiver one for pretty much any team in the NFL. He's big, he's fast, he's got hands, he's got routes. I like the guy quite a bit in terms of his upside. So just another kind of testament to how great this wide receiver class is. But again, not official that we know that he met with the Chargers, but there was some speculation that they met at his pro day. All right. A guy that was confirmed to meet with the Chargers not too long ago was Mason Pline, I think is how you say his name. Tight end out of Furman University. Couldn't tell you much about the dude other than what was in the article. He's huge, 6'7". He's an upside tight end in terms of receiving. And maybe the Chargers, kind of poking the bear a little bit in terms of what's worked in the past, because this guy was a basketball player, all right? And it looks like he's got some upside in terms of his ability as a receiver. So take that for what you will. I think the Chargers are still in on the position of tight end, whether it be a guy that's a starter in the future like Brock Bowers, or maybe a more adept dude or a practice squad guy like this dude, I would have to assume, in Mason Pline, all right? Next up, another USC guy, another guy that got a lot of Chargers fans excited. It's going to be Brendan Rice, wide receiver out of USC. This is a guy that I love. I quite honestly think when I looked into him, I wasn't quite prepared for what I was about to watch. I have a feeling about him. Of course, this is the son of Jerry Rice, so there's a lot of expectations behind his name, but I like him quite a bit in terms of his availability and running and routes, and it just feels like, yes, he's not going to beat you with his speed, but he's going to be available. And I can think of another wide receiver in and around the 3rd or 4th round that could bring that to their quarterback in the past. So who knows? I think Brendan Rice is kind of a hidden gem. He has the potential to be a pretty big talent in the NFL, but the Chargers certainly kind of view him that way, tagging him with a top 30 visit for the club. Being a top 30, you had to expect this one, right? Joe Alt, offensive lineman, Notre Dame, perhaps the best tackle we've seen come through the draft in many years, all right? There is kind of a big thing on this guy, though. He tested at right tackle a couple of times through those drills at the Combine, and he was a little bit lackluster, and it's something that's kind of been going around lately in terms of talk with the Bull fam, and whether or not he is worth the risk at pick number 5, which I think that's kind of where you have to take Joe Alt if you're going to land him at all, because some other team that needs left tackle would be ecstatic to pick this guy up, have their left tackle of the future, and just set and forget and not have to worry about the position for like a decade plus. The Chargers, on the other hand, if we were to draft him, we would definitely be moving him to right tackle, and there is a little bit of concern there. But either way, obviously, the Chargers are going to take a look at him. He's definitely a Jim Harbaugh kind of guy, and he is listed as a top 30 player for the Chargers in that visit column. All right. But we're not done with Notre Dame offensive lineman. No, we got this guy who we've been talking a lot about. I think he's been connected to the Chargers even more outside of a top 30 visit. Kind of sounds like a lot of dudes, or maybe he wasn't a top 30 guy, but it kind of sounds like a lot of experts were linking him to the Chargers. Don't know if there's any official visit quite yet, but there's a lot of talk that the Chargers like this guy. And Blake Fischer would be an awesome value dude. I think you can find him in the 3rd and 4th round. Might have to take him a little bit earlier than that. Maybe in a trade down scenario in round 2, I could see that happening. But Fisher's the perfect kind of archetype you're looking for at right tackle. He's big, he's physical, he's going to bring that power that the Chargers are going to try and emulate in 2024 and beyond. So Blake Fischer, an awesome option out there at right tackle. All right. Next up, a guy that you had to have expected the Chargers to take a look at, Mike Sainristil, cornerback of Michigan. He was talking with the team, a couple of Michigan guys. Maybe like the entirety of the Michigan roster has talked to Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers staff. So we can go ahead and put that to rest right now. I don't have all the Michigan players on here, obviously. But you can assume that the Chargers have some of the best insight on all of these players, and that we will likely pick up at least 1 or 2 of them in the draft. Sainristil is probably one of my favorite that you're going to find in day 2 for the Chargers in particular. Nickel corner, physical, mean, is going to play the position so finely tuned to the Jesse Minter system. It's ridiculous. So he's a high priority target for me, at least. And you have to imagine he is for the Chargers as well. All right. Next up, another top 30 pick here for the Chargers. Anthony Gould, wide receiver, Oregon State. Didn't know much about this dude. Looked him up a little bit. He does have some talent out there, especially in the slot. He's projected to be a short, fast, solid slot guy, good hands. And obviously the Chargers, who may be looking for wide receiver a little bit later in the draft, even if they choose top 5, a guy like Malik Neighbors, you might still be looking for more of a slot dude in the later rounds. And I think Anthony Gould is definitely not a bad option there. All right. Next up, Deantre Prince, I think is how you say the name. Cornerback out of Ole Miss. This is a guy I think has been confirmed to have met with the Chargers. And he, again, kind of represents what I believe is going to be some value later in the draft in terms of maybe depth for a position. Cornerback, the Chargers need it almost as much as they need wide receiver, which is kind of going overlooked at this point. But I like what the dude brings. He's tall, he's fast, He's got some depth potential, and maybe even, this was in the notes there, a priority undrafted free agent kind of guy to look at after the fact. Okay, we got a couple of guys like that on this list that even after the draft, we can start saying, oh yeah, remember that video? We had this guy floating around out there. Well, I recognize that name as some of the top undrafted free agents still available. Maybe the Chargers are meeting with him right now. We already know they've met with him already, and he's one that the Chargers probably look at as a nice depth option there. Okay, next up. Char Smith Wade, another cornerback, Washington State. Again, not much that I was able to find on the guy. Maybe didn't do my due diligence on that particular pick there, but he does look like another smaller but shifty slot cornerback to be looking at maybe in the mid to later rounds. Okay. Next up, I know that Tara's out there watching this video somewhere, and she could probably tell you everything you need to know about this guy, including how to pronounce his name. It could be Mace Funa. I'm going to go with Mase Funa, offensive linebacker, or outside linebacker, excuse me, Oregon. This dude, he looks awesome, actually. In my research, he's fast. He's decent in coverage. Some projected him to be undrafted. I found other sources saying that he could be a mid-late round guy. Either way, the Chargers have met with him, and he's a guy that I think would fit this new Jesse Minter system that is going to ask a little bit more from their edge players, the outside linebackers, in terms of coverage. And if he shows any flash there, I think there's a good chance of the Chargers picking him up as a depth dude for later down the road as they develop the depth. As you know, the depth is as important as the starters at some point. You're going to want a guy out there that kind of fits what you're trying to mold in the defense. All right. Another top 30 pick coming up. This time it's Jaavan Sanders, tight end, Texas. I have to imagine there's a lot of Texas players the Chargers were looking at that pro day. Okay. You can take a look at Xavier Worthy, who has a lot of upside. Let's be honest. He's not my favorite dude in like the first 2 rounds. But if you can get him at a value, and maybe the Chargers go crazy and pick him up in the second. I don't know. That speed is something to take into consideration. The fastest player in the history of the combine, matched up with Justin Herbert's big arm. It's something to look at. But in this particular segment, we're talking about Jaavan Sanders, who brings a lot of similar traits in terms of tight end. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but he's a very good receiving tight end in this draft. I would say second to Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers is a huge gap, right? There's Brock Bowers, there's the Pacific Ocean, and then there's Jaavan Sanders. But Sanders is still a very solid option for the Chargers. I would say in the second round, maybe third if you're lucky. But the dude would be an awesome talent. The Chargers are going to be looking at tight end a lot in this new system, and it's definitely one that I'm not surprised to get picked in terms of a top 30 guy. Okay? Next up, we got a guy that I actually kind of looked up for the first time in Blake Watson, running back out of Memphis. He fits a couple of different qualities I'm noticing in some of the dudes that the Chargers are looking at running back in particular later in the draft. Watson, I don't know where he's going to be drafted, but he carries these similar traits. He's small, he's powerful, he's compact, he's explosive, he's a solid pass catcher and pass protector, might I add. He's got great vision, and if I understand, he's one of the faster running backs that you're going to find in this draft. Where he's going to be drafted, I don't know, but he's a guy that the Chargers have been looking at. Okay? This one has a question mark next to it, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Chargers have looked into him. Rosengarden, Washington, right tackle, and in a system where your right tackle is acting as your blind side due to a left-handed quarterback in Michael Penix. I like this guy quite a bit in terms of a pass-protecting right tackle. Might not quite fit the system as well as other super powerful run-oriented right tackles, but if you're looking to protect your quarterback, Rosengarden's as good as it's going to get. And I do feel like there's a chance he could be in the second or third round. So you can get him at a value as well. A true right tackle, has some nice qualities there. Might be one that the Chargers are looking at. Heads up, here comes another top 30 visit guy. And of course, he is a fan favorite of the Chargers community. This is Brock Bowers, tight end out of Georgia. I'm honestly not shocked. In terms of maybe one of the first guys the Chargers got on the phone for a top 30 visit, I think Brock Bowers had to have been maybe even number 1. And there's many scenarios where the Chargers take him at 5, they trade down, pick him up there, maybe trade up into the later or into the later top 10 to pick him up. He's the kind of guy I can see the Bolts aggressively pursuing because of how huge of an emphasis he would be in our offense. This would be target 1, receiver 1. Outside of maybe if we got him and like Malik Neighbors or something, which is super unlikely, if you draft Brock Bowers, he's likely the top weapon through the air for this offense. He also brings a lot of upside as a blocker. He's super versatile. it's very easy to understand why the Chargers would go after him in terms of a private workout right away. Maybe even Jim Harbaugh's number one, hey, let me see this guy in action for a private workout for the Chargers. All right. Next up, Julius Woods, safety, ECU. Was that East Carolina, right? This dude, a little bit of a sleeper. I saw Bolt draft talk, talking everybody's ear off about him. I think he's pretty high on this dude, and it's one that it's kind of easy to see once you start looking into him. The dude is versatile, physical, very fast, really kind of fits in what I believe the Chargers have been looking for a while now, and an accent player for Derwin James. I think we kind of had it with Alohi Gilman until we needed Gilman to play high safety at free safety, at that position, fill in for that position, which saw a vacancy in 2023. Now, I think the Chargers could be looking for another guy that can, switch things up with Derwin James a little bit, who's playing up high, who's playing down low, while also bringing that physicality and tenacity in terms of the run game. I like this guy actually quite a bit. I think he's an awesome talent that could be looked at. Don't know quite where he's being drafted, but it's one to keep your eye out for in terms of Chargers getting depth at the safety position. I think DB as a whole needs a little bit of reinforcement. Hopefully he makes more appearances than JT Woods has the last couple of seasons. Next up, a guy that nobody's surprised to see on this list, Blake Corum, running back, Michigan, a top 30 visit guy. And it's one that could very easily be drafted by the Chargers soon as like round 3, maybe round 2 if you're going crazy, because of how perfect of a fit he is for Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman. He really is. I understand he's not the flashiest dude. I understand he's not going to be this big, RB1 potential guy. He might end up that way in the NFL. But where he lacks flash, he brings consistency, right? He's all reliable. If you need something to happen at the line of scrimmage, if you need those tough yards, if you need something to work out in your favor when you hand the ball off and it's, second and long, third and long, whatever, Blake Corum gives you a good opportunity for that because he is just, again, a consistently successful running back. And it's a lot of traits that are easily translatable to the pros. So he's a very safe pick in my mind. Maybe not the flashiest. Maybe won't get the Chargers fans as excited as other players, but he's a really good running back. I cannot deny that. And it would be one that, I would totally understand, and I would be behind if the Chargers decided to go with him in day 2. If we get him in day 3, then forget about it. It's a great value. Next up, a guy that I was kind of surprised to see on this list, Braylon Trice, edge, Washington. This is a dude, I think he's a day 2 guy, right? I think he's a mid to late day 2 guy, perhaps. But this is not as an edge rusher with a lot of upside, man. The Chargers were seen working very closely with them at Washington's pro day. And I like what he brings to a mentor defense, man. Don't quite know what his ability is in coverage. I don't know if he'd be asked to do much of that. But he is a very physical, violent, efficient pass rusher. Some would say a value even at round 2, which I kind of that's kind of where I see him being drafted. The Chargers have been looking at some edge players, and I think it's kind of showing us their foresight for the future of the position. It's a very important position for Jesse Minter and that system. But Trice, it's one to look at, man. I think honestly, if the Chargers have an opportunity, let's say they do trade down and have another second round pick, Trice could be one of those guys where you're like, hey, we have the luxury all of a sudden. Let's go grab the best player on the board. And to us, that is definitely Braylon Trice, who could bring a lot of heat in the future at the position of edge. Okay. Next up, a guy I didn't know very much about, but could have some upside. Braylon Trice, Trey Knox. I was like, wait, Trey Knox, tight end out of South Carolina. I still don't know quite much about this dude, other than he's a pretty decent receiving option. He's not the fastest dude out there, but from what I understand, he's a pretty solid possession kind of guy. But again, it's going to be one of those later round guys where if the Chargers need a little bit more depth at tight end, they can get it in the draft. There's some guys I like a lot more in the middle rounds, like Theo Johnson and Ben Sinnott. But Chargers doing their due diligence here. I think Trey Knox, not a bad option if you're looking for somebody of that skill set later. Now, a guy that I couldn't find almost anything on. You Kansas fans out there, let me know what's up with this dude, okay? Mike Nowitzki, okay? Center for Kansas. The biggest reason that, and they've met with him, by the way, the biggest reason that I wanted to point this out is because I've read a lot of talk about the center position in particular being very, very, very deep this season. Okay, so much so, I'm starting to wonder how much the Chargers are going to invest in interior offensive line in the early rounds because of how much value there is in the later rounds, particularly at center. Now, these are going to be guys that likely are going to sit behind Bradley Bozeman for a year or two to develop and before taking the starting role there. But Nowitzki could very well be a guy like that. I know there's a couple other dudes. I know the Penn State guy was being heralded a lot. But it's quite honestly an option. It's one that's kind of opening my eyes to what the strategy might be. If they want an offensive lineman, it'll probably be a tackle, maybe guard in the earlier rounds if that's where you're going to be drafting him. And then in the later rounds, you might want to go with that center that has a ton of depth, seemingly so, in the eyes of the experts. All right. Of which I am not. Let's go up to the next guy here. Another top 30 dude, Adarius Smith. I love this dude. This dude is one of the best slot wide receivers you're going to find in this draft, out of Texas A&M in particular. And it's, again, kind of obvious to me what's the plan is in terms of receiver. Even if, let's say, you miss on a receiver in the first round, Adarius Smith can be found in the later rounds, man. Like 3, I think, is kind of where he's projected. And it's going to be one of those guys that, hey, he's probably not going to be this huge outside receiver talent, but he's a heck of a slot guy. And you throw him into a system that's probably going to see a lot of RPOs and stuff like that. I mean, you could do a lot worse. It's a great, great class to be looking at really nice outside talent early or freakish talent like Malik Neighbors, and then going for a slot guy in the later rounds. And honestly, you get a solid slot guy, it frees up what you can do even with a guy like Malik Neighbors a little bit, okay? Next up, a guy that honestly I couldn't tell you much about. Michael Ayers, quarterback, Samford. He is what he is, right? And the Chargers might still be looking for a quarterback 3 at this point. I think the signing of Easton Stick, the re-signing, I should say, kind of edges me away from the Chargers drafting a guy this season, but you never know. Maybe round 7, similar to Brock Purdy, we find a guy that is a very, very good backup quarterback of the future. All right. Not too much time on him. Next up, Max Melton, rumored. Again, this is a... by the way, Michael Ayers got a top 30 visit, by the way. I don't know if it's been confirmed. That might be one that he was asked to do it, but we haven't seen it happen yet, but it's on there, okay? This one has a question mark next to it, so it's unconfirmed, but Max Melton have been rumored to talk to the Chargers during his pro day. And it's one that, again, very easy to see why this dude is climbing. He's going to be I think he's going to be a very underrated, even as he climbs, prospect this year. And I think he's going to end up being one of the better corners in the draft, especially if you're looking for like a corner 2 or a guy that's versatile in the slot or in the slot and on the outside. Melton is a great option if you're still looking for a corner after, let's say, round 2, right? He might not even make it into round 3 anymore, but I think round 3, where I feel pretty good about taking him. If he's there at round 4, then you've lucked out, and you got yourself a nice value there. Coming up here as we round out the bottom of the list here, man, I should say some of the more recent guys we've been hearing about. Brian Thomas Jr., another question mark on this guy, but the Chargers were very diligent in researching and studying the LSU guys this year. Of course, it's for good reason. LSU just spits out wide receiver talent like they're going out of style, right? It's absolutely nuts. And Brian Thomas, when talking about the top 3 wide receivers, there's such a huge gap between them and the next guy. It's noticeable, but that doesn't mean Brian Thomas isn't awesome. He would probably have been wide receiver 1 in last year's class quite easily. And he's going to bring a lot of electricity to whatever offense decides to draft him. This is a guy that you kind of look at pick, if we trade down with the Vikings, right? If he's available at pick 11, you probably go for it, right? Because he's going to bring the speed. He's got the size. He's got the physicality. He's got the X receiver attributes. That's kind of what you're looking for in a well-rounded guy. So I feel like Brian Thomas, a guy that was seen being watched very closely by the Chargers staff, would be an awesome target for the Chargers in a trade-down scenario, all right? But probably the best one in terms of a stick and pick, I don't know if he's listed as a top 30, but he was with the Chargers just a few days ago. Malik Neighbors. He already spoke with the Chargers privately. I'm sure he's a top 30 guy. I think it's obvious. Maybe just forgot to write it down. This is one that's starting to generate a lot of attention for Chargers fans. He was in California, supposedly house shopping, although he denies it. Of course, you're looking at properties out there in the case that you do get drafted. There's probably a lot of talk about the possibilities of him, because they're going to know more than we do, all right? They're in the system. They're around the experts way more, and then ultimately they're talking to the teams. The Chargers could very well say, like an 80% chance we draft you if you're there. They could say that to his face, and it would, inspire him to maybe look around at his future in terms of his housing situation in California. So either way, like, there's a lot of talk around it. And Malik Neighbors to the Chargers feels like still the most likely outcome for the Bolts at pick number 5. There's a lot of buzz generating about Marvin Harrison Jr., which I think is also very likely at this point. But again, if you're asking me to bet on what's happening at 5, I think it's Malik Neighbors. I think he knows the chances are very high for him as well. Okay. To round out the list, our bottom, 4 guys here, our most recent 4 guys, Trevon Wallace, outside linebacker, Kentucky. This was a top 30 guy. I don't remember where he's projected to be drafted, but this is one of those faster guys, right, on the line, or on the edge, right? This dude is quick. He'll get to the quarterback. And again, it's a trait that I'm starting to see a lot in terms of these linebackers in visiting with the Chargers. And linebacker, underrated, going to be very, very important for this team in particular because of this defensive system. So keep an eye on that. Trevon Wallace also has a lot of upside there. Did we go over Ray Davis? Speaking of Kentucky guys, I'm sure we did, right? I thought that he was on this list. Either way, I think we met with Ray Davis as well. Just keep that in mind. Leatu Latu, dude, edge player. This guy was just with Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers at the facility. I think even yesterday. This was one that kind of surprises me too. He's going to be an awesome player in the NFL. This could be the best edge of this class, right? And thinking about him with the Bolts is kind of ridiculous. Opposing quarterbacks would get chewed up and spit out so quickly. He's a monster. He had something, like 15 sacks last season. He had something like 13 or 12 the year before too. Like he's a model of consistency. He's a monster. And I would be shocked. I really would if the Chargers traded down and selected an edge, because it's not the biggest position of need at all on this roster, but the talent could outweigh that decision and put him on the roster as a starter next season, maybe after Khalil Mack retires or whatever, or moves on. I don't know what the situation would be, because you still got Tuli, you still got Bosa. It could be the Latu Tuli show in the future, and that's what they could be setting up with a selection like this, but still kind of an interesting choice right there. All right. I really hope I don't butcher this name here. The Cameroonian Richardson, cornerback out of Mississippi State, also was pegged with a top 30 visit for the Chargers. And this dude, again, don't know much about him other than he is very tall and very fast. I think 6'2", very, very fast 40. One that, I'm not quite sure where he's being drafted, but it really feels like corner depth is going to be something tackled in this draft, if not starting corner earlier in the draft as well. You can double dip. I double dip at the position all the time when doing my mock draft. So another guy that has met with the Chargers. He was also tagged with the top 30 visit. And then finally, a guy that's getting the most recent buzz is Edan Cooper, the guy I mentioned at the top of this video. Linebacker, Texas A&M. And it's quite obvious. He got a top 30 visit. Quite obvious why the Chargers are looking at him. He is fast. What do you run? Like a 4.51, a 4.52? He's an awesome presence in terms of a blitzer over the middle. He's not bad in coverage at all. He's a very, very, very solid day 2 selection if the Chargers were to go linebacker. There's a couple of linebackers I like, Junior Colson, of course, Peyton Wilson, but Edan Cooper is one of the cream of the crop guys that you're looking at in day 2. All right. And that's going to do it for now. If you guys have any other names that you know of that the Chargers have targeted, let me know in the comment section below. This is what I was able to find in my research. Again, huge shout out to Bolts Draft Talk on Twitter. The dude was awesome in providing a lot of information. I'm actually excited to go check out some more of his content on Twitter to see some of his insight on some of these prospects, because he's got a nice breakdown of a lot of dudes out there. So anyway, shout out to you guys. Thank you so much for joining me. If you did enjoy this content, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. We'll see you next time. And as always, bolt up, stay frosty. Neighbors at 5, starting to feel very real.